What do you do when a country that just had its military shredded, its air force destroyed, its nuclear sites turned to rubble, looks at the most powerful navy on Earth and decides to pick a fight anyway? That question is not hypothetical. That is exactly what just happened in the Strait of Hormuz. And by the time we walk through everything the mine laying during a ceasefire, the American strikes deep inside Iranian territory, the nuclear deal on the edge of collapse, and the one chess move Trump made that almost nobody noticed, you are going to see this situation in a completely different light. If this kind of deep, unflinching analysis is what you come here for, hit that subscribe button right now, drop a like on this video, and share it with someone who actually wants to understand what is going on in the world, not just the headlines, but the real story behind them. Now let us get into it. Let us go back to late May 2025. There is an active ceasefire between the United States and Iran. Diplomats are talking. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi is physically sitting in Doha, Qatar, at a negotiating table making promises, real ones, or so it seemed. According to reports cross-referenced from multiple regional and international outlets, Iranian officials were telling negotiators that the moment a peace deal was formally signed, Iran would begin clearing mines from the Strait of Hormuz. That was the offer. That was the promise. Clean up the mines, sign the paper, move forward. Except something else was happening at the exact same time. While those words were being spoken in an air-conditioned room in Doha, Iranian small boats were quietly moving through the southern end of the strait, not removing mines, laying new ones. During a ceasefire, during active peace talks, well, let that sink in for a second. The diplomats were talking peace, the boats were laying traps, both happening simultaneously by the same government. This is not a small detail. This is the entire story in miniature, because what it tells you is that for Iran's leadership, or at least a powerful faction within it, the negotiating table was never really about reaching a deal. It was about buying time. Keep the Americans engaged, keep the conversations going, keep the hope alive, and meanwhile do exactly what you want to do in the water. The diplomacy was the cover. The mines were the strategy. The United States military found out, and the response was not slow, it was not hesitant, and it was not limited. U.S. Central Command confirmed that American forces conducted what they called self-defense strikes in the southern region of the strait, targeting Iranian vessels that were actively in the process of placing mines in international waters. The CENTCOM statement was direct. U.S. forces struck missile launch sites and Iranian naval vessels, while citing the right to defend American troops and assets in the region. Those Iranian boats are now at the bottom of the Strait of Hormuz. But here is where the story stops being just another skirmish and becomes something much more significant. America did not stop at the boats. They went into Iran itself. Strikes hit military facilities inside Iranian territory, specifically infrastructure directly linked to the attacks on American warships. Iranian state media confirmed it. Explosions were heard in Bandar Abbas. Multiple cities in the surrounding region reported blasts. Now, if you do not know what Bandar Abbas is, pay close attention because it matters enormously to understanding why this strike was so significant. Bandar Abbas is not a minor coastal town. It sits directly on the Strait of Hormuz. It is home to one of Iran's most critical naval and air bases. It is the operational center of Iran's entire ability to project military power into those waters. This is the nerve center, the brainstem, and the U.S. hit it. Iranian state media confirming the blasts in Bandar Abbas is not a small thing. State media in authoritarian countries does not confirm military strikes unless the destruction is too visible to deny. The fact that they confirmed it tells you the strikes were real, visible, and serious. This was not a warning shot. This was a message written in the language of precision munitions. The message was simple. We know exactly where your capabilities are. We know exactly what you're using to threaten this waterway, and we are willing to remove those capabilities if you force our hand. Now, let us talk about how this was even possible, because the targeting precision on display here did not happen by accident. When American B-2 bombers flew missions over Iran in 2024, striking nuclear infrastructure and what many open-source analysts were tracking, the intelligence behind those strikes came from somewhere very specific. The JCPOA, the 2015 Iran nuclear deal, created an inspection and verification framework. The IAEA sent inspectors into Iran. They documented facilities. They mapped sites. For all the political fighting around that deal, it produced something that Western intelligence agencies found invaluable: a detailed, documented picture of Iranian military nuclear infrastructure. That picture was used in the 2024 strikes. That same targeting intelligence has been refined and used in every operation since. When CENTCOM says they struck the sites responsible for launching these attacks, they knew exactly what they were hitting. This was not reactive chaos. This was deliberate. This was prepared. Strike fast, remove capability, and do it before Iran can control the narrative. And Iran's response? Almost nothing. Official silence, No dramatic press conference, no significant counterstrike, no IRGC commander standing before cameras promising hellfire. Because here is the uncomfortable truth that every serious analyst is grappling with right now. Iran's conventional military is not what it was even 18 months ago. The IRGC still exists. The hardline factions still have power internally. But the capacity to meaningfully challenge the US Navy in open water has been stripped down dramatically, which creates a question that is genuinely hard to answer. If Iran knows its military is in this condition, why keep provoking? Why lay mines during a ceasefire? Why invite strikes on Bandar Abbas? There are two serious explanations. The first is that hardline factions inside Iran, elements of the IRGC specifically, are operating independently of the diplomatic track. They do not want a deal. They actively want to sabotage negotiations before a compromise can be reached. In this theory, the mine laying was not a government decision. It was a faction decision, a deliberate attempt to blow up the talks from within. The second explanation is colder. Iran is using provocation as a negotiating instrument. The calculation would be, raise the cost of continued conflict high enough, make the United States feel the pressure through oil markets and regional instability. And Washington will eventually accept weaker deal terms just to make it stop. Escalate during a ceasefire, not because you want war, but because you want to make peace too expensive to hold out for. Both of those explanations are genuinely disturbing. One means Iran's government cannot control its own military. The other means Iran is deliberately weaponizing a ceasefire as a bargaining tactic. There is no comfortable reading here, and the US response to both scenarios was the same: force, precise, immediate, and clearly communicated. The message from the strikes, from CENTCOM, from the White House, was unambiguous. The Strait of Hormuz is an international waterway. It belongs to global commerce. It belongs to every nation that depends on the roughly 20 million barrels of oil that pass through it every single day. And as long as American forces are in the region, no actor is going to mine it, toll it, or close it without facing consequences. Remember those boats at the bottom of the strait. Remember Bandar Abbas, because everything that happens next in the story flows directly from what happened there. Now let us move to where the real war is actually being fought, not in the water, in a negotiating room in Doha. And what has been unfolding at that table over the past several weeks is one of the most layered, complex diplomatic confrontations we have seen in years. Here is what broke publicly just days before the strikes. Significant leaks started moving through international media. The details painted a picture of an America that was desperate for a deal, willing to soften its position on enrichment, willing to compromise on core demands, willing to essentially hand Iran a diplomatic win even after dismantling most of its military capacity. Markets responded. Oil prices moved. Analysts started speculating. Political pressure on the White House intensified almost immediately. Now, here's the question you always have to ask when sensitive negotiations produce convenient leaks. Who benefits from this specific narrative getting out? Not the United States. A narrative of American desperation weakens Washington's leverage at the table. It encourages Iran to hold firm, wait longer, demand more. Iran benefits, obviously. But here is the less obvious answer that deserves serious attention. The Gulf states benefit too. Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the UAE, all three have massive economic stakes in this conflict ending quickly. The Strait disruption has complicated Saudi Aramco's export logistics. It has hit UAE trade volumes. Qatar, the world's largest LNG exporter, has faced shipping uncertainty that costs real money in real time. All three governments want this resolved immediately, not after months of additional negotiation. And if you are a Gulf state diplomat who believes Washington is being too rigid, leaking details that make the U.S. look inflexible and deal-hungry is an extremely effective way to generate market and media pressure. Oil spikes, business communities panic. Suddenly there is political cost to not closing a deal fast. Saudi Arabia and the UAE have done this kind of indirect pressure application before. It is a documented feature of their diplomatic approach, never confront Washington directly, but absolutely shape the information environment to push American policy in a preferred direction. Now here is where the story gets genuinely fascinating. Because Trump responded, but not the way most people expected. He pushed back hard on the leak narrative. His public statement was unambiguous. The United States will not accept any deal that leaves Iran with a pathway to nuclear weapons. He referenced the original JCPOA, called it a deeply flawed agreement, and made clear that any new framework would be enforced and verifiable in ways the 2015 deal was not. But buried inside that statement was one detail that most analysts glossed over, and it is arguably the most important development in the entire negotiation. Until very recently, the U.S. position on Iran's enriched uranium stockpile was binary. Either Iran ships it to the United States for destruction, or it transfers it to Russia. Iran refused both handing over enriched uranium outside Iranian territory was a sovereignty red line for the hardliners. It would look like defeat. It would be impossible to sell to a domestic audience already humiliated by military losses. And then, for the first time, the U.S. moved off that position. Trump's statement introduced a third option. Iran's enriched uranium could be destroyed inside Iran, on Iranian soil, under direct observation from IAEA inspectors. Downblended, mixed with lower enriched material, until it falls to civilian use levels, verified by the international nuclear watchdog. The sovereignty objection, gone. The enrichment stockpile, neutralized. The roadblock, removed. This is a real concession. It does not give Iran anything it actually wants strategically, but it removes the face-saving obstacle that had been blocking progress. And the fact that Trump included this in a public statement suggests it emerged from actual movement at the table, not as a unilateral offer. Marco Rubio confirmed the cautious optimism publicly. In appearances tracked across multiple broadcast reports, he said he believed the near term could bring good news, at least regarding the Strait and the broader process. He emphasized that paper agreements must be implemented, a pointed reference to Iran's history of making commitments and quietly violating them. But his tone was genuine possibility, not diplomatic boilerplate. He also pushed back hard on any suggestion that this administration would accept terms leaving Iran in a stronger nuclear position. He pointed out the obvious. Trump is the only American president who has actually taken concrete military action to prevent Iranian nuclear development, not threatened it, not sanctioned it, physically destroyed the infrastructure. The notion, Rubio argued, that the same president would then sign something handing that capability back is not a serious analysis. And looking at the totality of what has happened over the past 18 months, Iranian air defense networks dismantled, nuclear sites struck, IRGC naval capacity degraded, and now Bandar Abbas, it is very difficult to construct a realistic scenario in which Washington accepts a deal that does not fundamentally end Iran's nuclear ambitions. The military leverage is too complete. The pressure is too overwhelming. Every week without a deal hurts Iran significantly more than it hurts the United States. But here's the complication. And this is where the story expands into something bigger than just two countries arguing over uranium. There are other players on this board. The Gulf states, with their economic pressure campaigns. China waiting in the background. A deeply fractured Iranian domestic political situation that the regime's public messaging is working hard to conceal. And then there is the Abraham Accords statement, a move that, on the surface, looked almost absurdly optimistic. But through the lens of negotiating strategy, it reads as something else entirely. Here is what happened. In late May 2025, Trump issued a formal public statement calling on Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, Pakistan, Turkey, Egypt, Bahrain, and Jordan to formally join or expand participation in the Abraham Accords framework. And at the end of that statement, almost as an aside, he suggested that perhaps even the Islamic Republic of Iran might one day wish to consider joining. On the surface, this looks impossible. Turkey, under its current government, joining a normalization framework with Israel? Not happening. Saudi Arabia, whose population remains deeply opposed to Israeli normalization, especially after October 7th? Extremely unlikely. Pakistan, given its domestic political dynamics? Inconceivable. Iran joining the Abraham Accords? The probability is effectively zero. So why issue that statement? Now? During active negotiations? Because it was never meant to actually recruit those countries. It was a message. A specific, targeted, very deliberate message directed at the Gulf states who had been running their quiet pressure campaign against Washington. The translation is straightforward. If you want a seat at the table in the post-conflict Middle Eastern order, you need to be aligned with our framework. The Abraham Accords requirement is a rhetorical barrier. Everyone knows these countries cannot join right now. But putting the demand out publicly forces them to either back away from the pressure campaign or publicly explain why they are refusing peace. It is a chess move, a precise one. And it worked. Within hours of that statement, the public pressure from Gulf channels noticeably quieted. That tells you something important about how this administration is operating the entire Iran file. It is not just negotiating with Tehran. It is simultaneously managing Gulf state pressure and shaping the information environment. 4 simultaneous chessboards. Moved in public, in real time. So where does all of this end? Here is the realistic picture. Iran is militarily degraded in ways that cannot be quickly reversed. Its air defense is shattered. Its naval capacity in the strait is diminished. Its nuclear infrastructure has been physically struck. Its economy is under pressure that intensifies every week without resolution. The domestic political situation is more fractured than the regime admits. Hardline factions want escalation. Pragmatists want survival. The leadership is caught between those two forces. which is why you get mind-laying during ceasefire negotiations, as the product of a government that is not fully speaking with one voice. On the American side, the leverage is overwhelming, and everyone in the room knows it. The concession on in-country uranium destruction removes Iran's most credible remaining sticking point. The military capability to strike Bandar Abbas has been demonstrated, and the willingness to do so during negotiations has been shown. A deal is possible, a real one, a verifiable one, not because Iran wants it, but because the alternative is continued degradation. But here's what nobody is fully saying yet, and it is the part that matters most for what comes next. If a deal does get signed, the Strait of Hormuz dynamic does not simply reset to what it was before. The United States has now demonstrated that it will strike inside Iranian territory to protect freedom of navigation. That precedent does not disappear when the ink dries on a piece of paper. It reshapes every future calculation Iran makes, the next Iranian government, the next crisis, the next faction inside the IRGC that decides to test the boundaries. They will all remember Bandar Abbas. They will all know what happened to those boats. That is not a small thing. That is a fundamental shift in how power is projected and understood in that region. It is now a demonstrated red line with demonstrated consequences. And that changes the calculus for every player, Iran, the Gulf states, and China watching from the distance. The boats are at the bottom. The message was received. The Strait of Hormuz will never be quite the same ambiguous space again. That is the story that the headline coverage is missing, and now you have it. If this video gave you something real, something beyond what you were seeing in your feed, then do something real in return. Share it with one person who needs the full picture, not just the talking points. That one share genuinely matters more than you think. Stay sharp, stay skeptical, and I will see you in the next one.